One of Château de Pernon's most extraordinary features is her breathtaking natural setting. The splendour of the Grande Allée stretching through the forest towards the horizon, her sublime English park, the peaceful serenity of centuries-old trees that mark her rolling meadows. But, unlike the château itself, the estate's park was never finished. Interrupted by the outbreak of the French Revolution, marred by changing tastes, and neglected and forgotten for decades. So, the delicate task of designing a park and gardens for this 18th century gem falls to us today in the 21st century. This week, we share with you the first steps in an ambitious quest to complete a journey that began almost 250 years ago. These are some of the original 18th century plans for Château de Pernon's park and gardens. Hidden away for over 2 centuries and discovered when we arrived over 4 years ago. Pernon's designers imagined a vast French formal garden, based on symmetry and inspired by the French landscape architect André Lenotte at Versailles. Such gardens with parterres in geometric shapes, fountains, pools and ponds, tree-lined avenues and levels were thought to evoke the harmony and virtues of ancient Rome. The Jardin à la Française represents a staggering assertion of human control over nature. Huge volumes of earth were moved to create perfect flat levels. Parterres with complex curves required huge maintenance by armies of gardeners.
This is end of the 18th century.
Yeah, 1794.
Yes, but we are not sure that it has been executed.
Yes.
Because when the revolution became, I think everything stopped. Antoine Achard de la Haye est revenu en 1806 et en fait, je pense que les travaux reprennent en 1806 et pas forcément avec ce plan-là.
Oui, donc c'est pour ça qu'on a le parc anglais derrière. Donc...
Et c'est effectivement, je pense que il devait y avoir sans doute des choses préparatoires, peut-être quelques parties qui avaient été faites, et puis ensuite il y a eu le parc à l'anglaise qui a été créé.
Changing fashions and new ideas emerged that rejected symmetry in favour of nature. This became known as the English Park. Château de Pernon was constructed at exactly this point of transition, and it led to a remarkable outcome. The original plans were only partially executed. The symmetry and curves of the Grande Allée and the Cour d'Honneur remain in front of the château. We can even find the last traces of some of the original avenues planned for the estate. But, in keeping with the changing fashion, at the back of the château to the south, the owners laid out an English park, which, although neglected, we still admire today. With the entire estate, the park and the buildings now heritage listed, we must tread carefully as we rediscover and redesign an estate of rare beauty. It's a task that is way beyond Tim and I, and so a remarkable partnership has been created. For the last 3 years, Australian landscape designer, the award-winning Ian Barker, has been visiting Château de Pernon. Through hundreds of hours of careful reflection, discussion and planning, a master plan for the estate's parks and gardens is gradually taking shape.
First of all, you're overwhelmed by the scale. I'd seen photos before I left Australia and the photos don't do it any justice. I think there should be an overall master plan. You know, we always start with the overall vision and create what we call the bones or the skeleton of the garden. And then if we can get the skeleton right, then we can take our time and concentrate on each zone. We're thinking that we would be very formal in this zone.
Yeah.
And then we push the English park garden that was placed and we push that out.
We know that this this arrangement here was certainly made on the second half of the 19th century. There was a first project executed, and this second one, and I think it's corresponding to the reconstruction of the terrace, and I think it was for the, I would say, for the carriage.
Okay.
Pour les calèches au 19e siècle. This is 18th century wall, and this is the transformation. And perhaps what could be interesting, just for us to understand, it's to dig here and to know if this staircase was executed or not.
Okay. So
because it perhaps it still exists under that. Just for the knowledge.
Pour un sondage.
Yes, un sondage pour la connaissance. Parce que je pense que quand on regarde, quand on superpose les plans, en fait, l'escalier, il est là.
D'accord.
Et donc, si ça se trouve, il est enterré en dessous.
I feel like you would be so happy if that was the case.
I would jump for joy.
Yeah. Using the original 18th century chateau plans, our architect uncovers that Pernon's original entrance could have been modified in the 19th century to accommodate carriages. If the original plans were executed, under the existing terrace there may be vestiges of the 18th century stairway leading to the chateau's terrace. In the future, a test excavation will be carried out to see if this is in fact the case.
So at some stage the gate behind us would have been the entrance to the chateau. We can still see here the last traces of the path that would have brought people up to the entrance just in front of that ornamental gate. It's obviously been a long time since this was used in that way. Having had a chance to have a look and reflect on it, Ian, what's your thinking?
The spine of the garden is from the Grand Allée to the front door. And then having a perpendicular line off that to what we think may have been the original gate or one of the original entrances, I think just makes perfect sense. I want the reveal of the chateau to be for people to have enough time to enjoy it. And so when we come through the trees, and originally the drive went through the trees, you'll get a glimpse of the chateau from maybe 150, 180 metres away, which means it gives you a little bit of time. And then if we continue the roadway to that central axis and they turn to the gates, that's when the moment will be wow, and they'll get a true sense of the scale of the building, because no image, no video does the chateau justice until you're standing and you see it in its full glory.
Ça, c'est vraiment le portail principal qui est créé, il est 1812,
oui.
Parce qu'il n'avait pas eu le temps de le faire.
Oui.
Mais normalement, on entre, effectivement, on est censé entrer ici. I think the original access was here.
Yeah.
And there was an alley with trees, I think. And here, you just
Made a sharp turn.
Voilà. Mais ça, je pense que c'est vrai que c'est pas très habile. Comme,
oui.
Et il y a eu quelque chose, puisque ici on a un pont ancien, donc oui, c'est tout à fait. Ça, je pense que c'est pas mal. Il faut
okay, cool.
juste l'organiser, quoi.
Oui,
mais c'est. But I think it's a good idea because it's very, very impressive to come from here.
Yeah.
Our challenge is to create a symmetrical garden that pays homage to the existing space. When you see something that's in balance, it calms you, and that's our job.
What is important, I think, if we try to reconstruct a formal garden, part of a formal garden, it's important to respect some
of the original...
Some structures of the original one. The two facades of the chateau are nearly the same. One on the north with the courtyards and the perspective, the landscape, and this one here to the gardens. And what is interesting and what we saw from the scaffolding here, it's the huge landscape, very natural. Il est très beau et très fort, le parc, avec des beaux arbres, avec des choses. Et moi, je trouve que de ce côté-là, miser sur le jardin anglais, il faut juste que le pourtour du château soit effectivement bien construit.
Okay.
So Ian, we've transitioned from the front of the chateau, which has a very geometrical design, if you like, with those curves and straight lines. And we've come now to the back of the chateau where, after the French Revolution, instead of executing those incredible plans that we've seen that would have had a highly geometric French garden extending out really for an enormous space behind us, they instead went with the changing fashion of the time and they went with an English park. And so that's what we've inherited here. What's your thinking about the challenges that transition from the French style at the front to the English park at the back? How do you address some of those challenges?
The challenge is when you walk out the back door, I think we've got a beautiful entrance. We've got some symmetry and some structure. And then we cross over the moat and there's this abrupt start to the parkland. I think creating some regimented, rigid lines with steel edging that defines a decent width gravel path, and then that leads into the slightly formal garden potentially on the other side. That's our transition point. So I think the road will actually create a transition.
Okay. Ian, the beautiful orangery, which we just adore, and so sweet because we were just talking about an outdoor dining space and a space for us to have outdoor entertaining, and one of our artisans is just here with his partner and their puppy having a picnic for lunch, which is just so sweet. But it also sort of gives us the idea that this is a place that you're naturally drawn to relax and to hang out around. It has that sense, it really does draw you in.
Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful part of the property. When this was constructed in the early 19th century, the owners of the chateau knew that the views out to the east were magnificent and they wanted to protect them and hang a bit of a lantern on them.
It is, in my opinion, the prime spot for a formal garden or a parterre garden or a perennial garden, herbaceous border. You know, this is the side of the chateau where we get beautiful light. We've got enough space, you know, nothing feels cramped. We've got the orangery as a backdrop. If we're sitting in the orangery having lunch, dinner, we want to be able to see both sides, both ways. So having a beautiful flowering garden on this side with the view down the valley, I think works quite well. Even something as simple as parking a car needs to be given a lot of thought. We can use design to create what is a seamless, logical entrance without the use of multiple car park signs to take the visitor to a place that just makes sense. One of the starting points for the design and request was, when we have 3 or 4 guests arrive, where do they park their car? Which sounds simple, but there's no way we're going to put a car in front of the chateau. The back of the chateau is a mirror of the front, so we don't want to put a car there and ruin that view when people are walking around.
The orangery is beautiful and we want to keep it clear.
We love the orangery, and I'm conscious of garden maintenance long term, but if we are going to do a special, maybe perennial garden or herbaceous garden, the orangery is so beautiful that I think it should happen on that side, and we've got a bit of room on that side. This is the most logical space for the cars, but what we don't want to do is when you're in these rooms upstairs and you're looking west, you have this magnificent forestry canopy. It's critically important that the upper canopy isn't hindered in any way, so maintaining some of these larger trees I think will be critical to design.
Non, parce qu'ici vous verrez les voitures là, parce que là c'est le.
He's just worried that from those windows you'll see the cars.
You will.
Parce que en fait, ce qu'on aurait envie, elles sont sans doute bien ici, mais c'est de faire une haie ici et d'avoir un parking qui permette, qu'on ait suffisamment d'espace pour masquer, quoi, pour faire un effet de masque.
The other option is to do a hedge.
Je pense que c'est une bonne place, ça certainement.
So we're just setting up some parallel lines off the moat to set out for the edge of what we hope will be the driveway. And then there's a couple of distinct options for where the car park might go. So rather than debate them, we're just going to mark both of them out and then we can do a few test runs with the car.
All right, what do we have to do today?
I'd like to open the view to the Lebanese cedars.
Yeah.
That's sort of first and foremost, that's the centre line of the property.
Yeah.
To do that, we need to push back this part of the forest.
Yeah.
And the other big one is, the copper beech is a spectacular tree. It'd have to be at least 200 years old. Mm-hmm. I'd like to clear around that to give it some space and to remove some of the competition so it'll fill up a bit more. And then finally, there's a magnificent oak copse.
Yeah.
But because it's been allowed to grow down so far, it's sort of just, it's stunted the view. I'd like to lift it up so we can extend the view. The chateau is hundreds of years old. This garden will hopefully be around for another 200 or 300 years. We need to design the overall plan and then we can just pick off little pieces, you know, whether it's the car park first or whether it's the front entrance first. The garden design, when it's finished, whether that be 5, 10, 20 years from now, will look like it was always meant to be there 200 years ago, let alone 200 years from now. And that's the challenge, and that's half the fun. So what we do is we design a tree that 100 years from now will look the right size. You know, so we don't design in 1 year or 2 years, we design in 100 years. And, you know, I very rarely get to have that opportunity. So, you know.
It's like now we benefit from the trees that someone planted 200 years ago.
Exactly.
And in 200 years from now,
The
they'll
legacy,
benefit from the trees that we planted.
Yeah, what a wonderful thought that is.
Yes, completely.
It's awesome.
So starting the planning on the parks and gardens here at Pernon is really such an important milestone, with the works on the exterior of the chateau now so well advanced that we can safely say we will save the chateau, which when we found her, she was only a few years away from total ruin and collapse. And now the transition to being able to make some of the long-term decisions about the parks and gardens, it really is a very special moment.
Yeah, and we really have come a long way, babe, haven't we? Because today it's been raining a lot, and only 6 months ago we would have been up in the roof emptying buckets in a terrible panic. So it's very satisfying to get to this stage finally. But I think also an incredible thing is the discovery of these 250-year-old plans for the Château parks and gardens, which allows our architect to complete a diagnostic study to understand what the original layout was intended to be, and then together with Ian Barker to come up with a wonderful plan for the parks and gardens for the future of the Château.
And it really is such a wonderful collaboration between the creative work being done by our landscape designer Ian Barker and the focus on heritage, always here at Pernon, the obsessive focus on preserving, protecting and honouring heritage. And we get such incredible guidance and expertise from our heritage architect, Monsieur Frédéric Didier. And so the collaboration between those two perspectives is just such an important part of the redevelopment and the reimagining of the parks and gardens here.
And we will soon start sharing some of the plans for the parks and gardens and also undertaking some of the initial work. So stay tuned, because in the coming months we'll be able to share some more about that.
And remember, if you'd like to follow the restoration of Château de Pernon more closely, we post a daily update on our Instagram stories, an exclusive weekly video on Patreon, And this week on Patreon, I share with you the incredible story of this man and his amazing escape during the French Revolution.
Otherwise, just hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and we'll keep you updated here.